Elmore Sportscast. I here with Peter Kohout. He worked with multiple successful fighters from the UFC, PFL, and of course, the Contender Series to have successful weight cuts. I work with Muhammad Ali is currently going to fight in the Contender Series. So how's it going, sir?
I'm doing well, doing well. I had a guy last night fight in PFL, so I was with him all week doing all the weight cut stuff, and he's from my same gym too. So I was, in his corner, but didn't go his way. But it was still a great, great fight, especially for the, his experience level and whatnot. Fighting a tough opponent, you just not really losses, but they're learning lessons. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. But hey, you did your part of the job and got him successfully to the weight cut itself and got him cut for it. I appreciate it. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So, and you also, I didn't get to recognize some of the other, course, fight promotions. You have multiple like lines of fighters that fought for multiple different promotions, which is insane. But what kind of got you started and involved in that business of for the nutrition part of the like MMA fighters and fighters itself?
Right, yeah, so absolutely. So funny enough, I really just started learning it because I wanted to help myself, just learn more about it, how I can be better for my weight cuts or my strength conditioning because it's, my background. And that's really kind of where everything started from and stemmed from. And then, as I saw success of people from the gym be like, oh, can I get some help? Can you help me with this? I see you're making weight really easily and blah, blah, blah. And you're cutting a decent amount. I'm like, oh, yeah. And then things kind of evolved from there. I finished up like after the military, I finished up my degree in health science and human performance. Um, you know, Continued on doing, internships with in the strength conditioning world, working with like Air Force TAC Ps, mentoring under other people like George Lockhart. He's kind of like the godfather, if you will, for like kind of the weight cut stuff in a sense. I learned some like my initial things from him, and then obviously branched out and learned more on the science side of things too, especially from Dr. Nick Barringer. So he was a registered dietitian with the 75th Ranger Regiment, but he's also worked with like Jim Miller for a lot of his fights and stuff. And so, he's a good connection of mine and learned a lot from him as well. And so yeah, I mean that's kind of where it kind of stemmed from, just wanted to learn things myself. And then I love, the sport. It's, probably my opinion, best sport in the world, right? Fighting or combat sports. Cause they say if you got a basketball on one corner, football on one corner, hockey on one corner, and a fight breaks out on the fourth corner, everyone's gonna go and watch the fight, right? you know. So but yeah, that's kind of where everything started from.
That's pretty awesome. So do you feel like obviously I'm gonna bring in some military transition here for that. Um Somewhat I'll say military has very good nutrition sometimes, but do you feel like your military transition from to civilian for nutrition that I feel like it kind of changed to like help you out a lot in the future, being in the military as well?
Yeah, for sure, because my entire time in the military was all exclusively like special operations. So, and before that, like, I mean, I was doing combat sports my whole life and I was very disciplined there. But then in other aspects of my life, I was not like school. I was terrible at it. I just didn't give a shit. And I was like, what am I going to do? Go to college or work at McDonald's with my, the high school diploma or so I was like, I'll join the military. And obviously, you don't make a whole lot of money in fighting. So I went into that. And it definitely instills like a form of discipline into you further that's beyond just the physical aspect, right? Because I feel like the physical aspect, this type of people, athletes, like we really like it, right? We enjoy working out, doing these things, pushing ourselves. We know how to embrace the suck, if you will, right?
There it is.
So yeah, but some of the more intellectual side of things and like, uh learning land nav or learning all these different weapon systems and when you're new in Ranger Regiment, you're a private and you get fucked with a lot and they like quiz you on things. If you don't get it right, you got to do push-ups. You know what I mean? So that definitely builds like other aspects and rounds you out too, like discipline wise, and definitely helped me for the like I said, intellectual side or academic side of things. I think it definitely helped me prepare me in that regard because afterwards I went to college and I did well. I would say I was like an A+ 4 point GPA student, but I did well, especially in all the classes that were related to, my field, not like the math and English, but you
Yeah.
know, everything exercise science or human performance, well, I excelled at and I really enjoyed. So, military definitely played a huge part in like developing that for me.
Absolutely. Because when I first saw your flag, I was like, okay, Ranger bat, there it is. So, and I was completely to the point where the regular army, and of course, you have Ranger bat and stuff like that. There's always like a night and day situation. It's not the completely the same at all. Um, because aren't you able to focus more of like on individual nutritions for yourself? I would say in that matter.
Yeah, I believe it's like changed a lot, but we definitely have the resources there. So, like how the regular army now has, I think it's called like H2F, like the you guys kind of got like strength coaches and stuff now. I believe, from my understanding at least, it stemmed from the special operations side of things because when I was in, I believe it was just exclusively the special operations guys had that. Like we had physical therapists on staff, like for us. We have, I mean, obviously 75th Ranger Regiment got a huge budget, like, but we have physical therapists, strength coaches. Like I believe our strength coach was like a guy who used to work for like the Eagles and stuff. Like, so really top notch guy. So we really had a lot of like resources there at our disposal for that. Nutrition, I wouldn't say as much and like individualized, but it was definitely we had the guidance there for us to like push us and make sure we're moving in the right direction for whatever it is our goals are. But I mean, you know how it is. Sometimes you're going out in the field and you're eating MREs and your days on end and not a whole lot of just calories to get you through. You know what I mean? So
You eat the dangerous Skittles.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
eat the gum or you don't eat the gum. You have to decide what you're going to do.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Um, so you have notable fighters. That you gave me a list of them. Your list was substantial, and it was like to the point where I'm like, all right, I'm gonna have you explain your list because it was. I know you can't give their secrets of what you do because then it kind of like it'll probably cross the line of explaining things. But what is so far of the hardest part you had to deal with so far with some of your UFC or PFL guys or even the other promotions?
Yeah. Um, well, I won't go into like exact numbers on like how
Yeah,
much a person cuts weight or anything, but
yeah.
in terms of all of this, yeah, I mean, like I worked with, I've been doing this since like 2020, and I believe like the first big event that I worked was UFC 249, and I was like working with George and all those guys there. We worked with Sadiq Youssef, Drew Dober, and Alexa Grasso for that. Our little crew, those are the people that we were working with for that. Um, I believe both of them won, or Sadiq and Drew both won, and then I think Alexa, she had a hard time making weight, but we weren't with her for the whole camp. We were just there for the final part for the weight cut for her, like 5 week stuff. But I mean, it really depends on where the person's at. Obviously, at the higher level, the stakes are so high, so it's like you really don't have to. It's not really necessarily anything that's like tough about it. It's really just managing things, coordinating things with coaches and their training schedule to really know, get to where they need to go. Um, in terms of coming up with a plan for them. Really, like most of the challenges come from like kind of short notice stuff, and if they're a little heavier moving into things. But honestly, most of the problems I run into are really at the lower end, the like less high level, just because they're you know, not as disciplined maybe, or it's not as full time for them because they're not making as much money. Um, and it's really those guys. Like I've had so many people come to me. They're just like, "Hey, I fight in 5 weeks or 2 weeks, and I'm 30 pounds over. What do I do?" I'm like, "You go up a weight class is what you do."
Yeah.
Especially you're fighting at 135. Um, but I think really for those higher level guys, like they're so disciplined, they do everything they need to do. Um, there's really not a whole lot of there in trouble that come into things, like I said. It's really just coordinating with them, making sure they're doing the right things at the right time, and really coming up with like a real, like, tailored plan for them each day, depending on their output, right? Because if you're sparring hard that day and lifting that day, or you doing strength conditioning and or doing a 3 session day, that's going to be a lot different than if you're doing one skill session and just or a rest day. You know what I mean? The output's going to look different. So really having a schedule for them that's kind of like in the strength conditioning world we call it undulating, which means it like goes kind of like in waves, or certain amount on this day, certain amount of volume on this day. And it would be the same for like their nutrients, right? Making sure they're having more calories, more carbs on their higher training days, and then adjusting things as we go along.
Absolutely. I appreciate for explaining that because because I speak when I speak to fighters, I ask kind of like I never try to ask the question. It's like the only question people always try to avoid is how was your weight cut? Because that's like the most generic. Um, it's kind of like that's the really hard part, and it's kind of like let's not focus on them trying cutting on weight. So me speaking to you, it was is completely awesome because I kind of like to learn the process of and the stress, and obviously it's got to be hard during the weight cutting process of there during those times. So
Yeah, I mean, we can run through all that. I could run you through like what it might look like. You take someone a person to the end.
that'll be
But
awesome if you have time. I love that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's obviously we'll go into all the numbers on everything, but we can run through a little framework.
Mhm.
So, first things first, like when you work with someone, we got to find out like where their baseline is, right? Um, for whatever it is, whether it's strength conditioning, nutrition, we got to know where they're at. So, usually in like strength conditioning testing too, like they'll recommend you do a body composition analysis as well. So that's like your body fat percentage, lean body mass. You could do that through something like a DEXA scan or even visually. If a person can do that through a DEXA scan, I'll have the athlete do that. But if not, I can do it visually, just because even the DEXA scans, they can have like a margin error of like 3 to 5% too. And sometimes visually, if you've been at it a long time like me, you can really, you know, get a good estimate on where they're at body fat wise. So we really start there and kind of reverse engineer what their body looks like. So we get either the DEXA scan, like I said, find out their body fat percentage, and let's just say their total weight is, we'll just keep it round numbers, like 100 pounds. Obviously no one's 100 pounds, but we'll just use that number. And we know they're 20% body fat. Now, from there, we kind of know their lean body mass, their total body mass without any sort of body fat whatsoever would be around 80 pounds, right? And so from there, we can use that through like various formulas that are out there to really calculate their basal metabolic rate. Just like as a base level, how many calories per day do they need to burn just to like survive, right? Um, so then from there, you're going to find out what their training schedule looks like, and how they're doing week to week, what days are hard, what days are not hard. And what I really like to do is I tell them, hey, fill out this, thing, write down all your training sessions for how long the session is. And then, if it's an hour, jujitsu, 1 hour, and then a scale on 1 to 10, how like hard it is in terms of like energy output, or like, demanding for you, whether it's a 7 out of 10. It's called RPE, rate of perceived exertion, right? And then we can kind of go from there to really figure out how much they're burning on each day, um, to really paint out the full picture of what their total calorie expenditure is on a weekly and daily basis, right? Now, obviously, from there, we're going to go and set our targets for our carbs, fats, proteins. Now, if they're in camp, obviously, for a cut, we're going to go a little higher on the protein side of things. So, about 2.2 to 2.5 grams per kilogram of lean body mass. That's going to ensure we're keeping a um, good amount of protein so that while they're cutting and they're in this calorie deficit through training camp, they're not losing any muscle, or it's very minimal, the amount that they're losing, right? That's typically like anything above the 2.5 range, is from like the research that I've read and that's out there. It's really kind of like, I would say it defeats the purpose, but you could allocate those calories for your fuel sources like carbs, right? And now, then from there, we're gonna go, the fats and the the carbohydrates. Now, generally speaking, for like fight camps and stuff, we're gonna go a little lower in fat than you probably would out of camp, just because it's normally it's an acute cut. You know what I mean? It's over several weeks. It's not something that's going to be like year round. So we'd really rather allocate those calories to carbohydrates to really fuel their training, right? Just because that's going to be our like main energy source. And 1 gram of fat is around 9 calories versus 1 gram of carbs and protein to our four calories per gram. So if we go a little lower on fat, then we can definitely get a bigger boost and allocate more calories to carbohydrates, and that'll kind of like fuel our training, right? So everything making sense so far?
Absolutely, because it definitely explains the science of it. That's the reason why I'm just interested, because it's there's a lot into it more than just like don't eat something. It's like, or don't eat this or drink this. So it's kind of like that's why I love learning the science behind it all. So
Yeah, yeah. And then yeah, so then from there, carb allocation kind of goes to where heavier around training. So normally in a cut, anywhere between 3 to 6 grams per kilogram of lean body mass, but we can go higher if they don't have to cut a lot of weight, or lower if they do have to cut a lot of weight. But if they do and it is lower, then we're really allocating those carbs around training times, pre and post, to make sure that they're properly fueled. They're recovering as well afterwards. They're refueling or replenishing their glycogen stores and all that. It's really going to depend on like where they're at with things, like I said, but that's kind of like just the base on like how you would go from there, right? And so then, with all of that, too, now we're going to have like our main amount of calories per day and macros, protein, carbs, fats, and whatnot, right? And then from there, we can also kind of while we're doing this, we're also reverse engineering, okay, how many calories are they roughly burning per day? And how much do we want to lose target wise per week, weight wise, to get to them where we need to go to be within our range, our striking range for the actual like acute weight cut part, right? And so, depending on how far they're at, generally speaking, it's under 1% of their body weight per week. That's kind of the sweet spot. Because when you start going over 1% of your body weight per week on like weight loss, now you have like a higher chance that you're going to be losing some lean muscle mass too, right? Especially when you start going to 1.5% of your body weight per week, that's going to be a lot more muscle mass that you're going to be losing. So, if you're a 200-pound person, roughly, that's like 2 pounds a week that you can lose, and will be relatively like majority fat. Like, generally speaking, I'd like to keep it a little bit under 1%, just because it also gives us a little bit of a cushion too if we need to move things up. Um, and it preserves our lean body mass, our muscle mass even more, so that we can we can really just strip the body of the body fat and keep what we need, right? That functional lean body mass um, from there. So that's kind of like the gist of how we do things for, finding out where they're at, calculating their calories and whatnot, and then figuring out their weight descent, right? Because we're going to have, like I said, we're going to have a point where we're slowly moving our weight down week by week and getting to the point of whatever amount of weight that you want to be at before you start like the actual water cut that comes in February.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it seems like it's well, I kind of see how fighters are like on the scale for like the actual initial um like for scaling that day, but it's kind of like I always thought until today that it was just don't drink water, don't eat these certain fatty foods, stay away from this, until you just basically starve yourself. But the way you explain it to me, it's like you have very beginning, if you especially if you have time, it's better if you have time for weight cutting. It's like slowly just like taking it off as it goes, and then you go into the full force night before, week before, or something like that. But at some point, when do you feel like that a fighter shouldn't like probably shouldn't cut? Like when you're cut, say you're starting to cut for the fight week or something like that, and they have like a certain amount of pounds. But when do you feel like they probably shouldn't cut to that weight? Like, how do you know possibly, or
Are you
figure it
talking
out?
about like during fight week, or even like if someone just came to me off the street and be like, "Hey, I weigh this much and I want to fight at this much. Can I make that weight?"
Probably more of that one.
Okay, okay. So, um, really doing a body composition analysis, like I said, will paint the full picture on
Okay.
like how much body fat they have, right?
Yeah.
Because then from there we can reverse engineer. Like obviously it's not perfect because you might lose some lean body
Yeah.
mass while we're dieting down and whatnot, just because it's somewhat inevitable. When you're in a calorie deficit and you're training that hard too. But if someone is around, 20% body fat, let's just use the 100 pounds as an example because it's a nice round number. If they weigh 100 pounds and they're 20% body fat, we know that like typical for a male, it's probably around anywhere between 8 to 12%. That's like relatively like super athletic lean. And so we can calculate, okay, um, if you're 100 pounds and you want to, and 20 pounds of that is fat, and what would you be at around roughly 10 to 12% body fat? What weight would that be? Right.
Mhm.
Because that's usually like the weight where someone's like pretty athletic, their abs are visibly showing without being flexed and whatnot. And we're not going single digits where, and I feel like that's a little bit more genetic, but for the people that hit those single digits like relatively easily um, on the body fat scale. But from there, it's a good range, right? So, you know, roughly, let's just say 10. So that would be 90 pounds for them. So it'd be like, 100 pounds total weight, 20 pounds is body fat, and then 10 is, 10 of that is okay. He would be like 90 pounds at 10% body fat. Now, from there, you'd be like, okay, now how far off is that from the actual weight class, right? Because we're actually still doing that water cut during the fight week, right? Like you always hear people's person cut 10, 20, 15 pounds during fight week, right? And so from there, we're going to see how far off their total weight is percentage wise from their weight class. So, generally speaking, for most people in the UFC PIs kind of put this out like anything within 6% and under that's relatively safe, minimal side effects and whatnot. So within 6% of your body weight or less. So if you're like 10% body fat and within 6% of your fight weight, you do that no problem, right? Now 6 to 8%, that's you may start to feel some side effects and whatnot from the cutting weight, a lot more lethargic and whatnot. more drained, have to cut more water weight. So there's that. Then when we start getting above the 8%, that's when things start to get like really tricky, or you really start to feel that weight cut, right? Um, 8, 9 is a little pushing it, and then anything over like 10% of your body weight that you have to cut during fight week, that's really like a no-go zone. So just kind of like recap that. We figure out what their lean body mass is, or what their body fat or body composition might is now, and what it might be if we stripped as much fat as possible to get them down to like around 10%, give or take. And then from there, we see, how far off percentage wise are they from the weight class, whether it's 6%, 7%, 8%, 10%. And then we can kind of gauge, okay, if it's above 10%, maybe you might want to consider moving up a weight class. Or if you're above 10% and you're 15% body fat, then you got a little more room to work down there. But that's kind of how it works, right? Like, at least on a general sense, to give an idea on an athlete so that they don't just have like an unreasonable aspect on, like, I need to cut 30 pounds to make 135. You know what I mean? Just because if you don't know where you're going, then you don't have a plan or at least numbers. Obviously, it's like nothing is 100% accurate. Like, this 100% is going to work exactly how I said, but at least you have like a good general idea that's relatively accurate. You kind of know, you got a plan, if you're being realistic or not, and you can kind of figure things out.
What what is the best recovery? I guess every fighter is different. Of course, you have male, female, so genetics obviously not the same. But what is the general, I guess, best recovery after for a weight cut, like for fight day? Like, what is obviously you have that night before, you have like 24 hours before you can fight. But what is the best recovery process?
Right. So with all of that, it's kind of going to be like a tiered process to get to where we need to go for them to recover. But um, first things first is we really see like how much weight did they actually cut in terms of pounds during fight week. So if they cut 10 pounds of water, like an acute cut during fight week, then we need to replenish about 150% of that. So that means we need to consume about 15 pounds worth of fluids. So that, it sounds like a lot, but that's really like just under 2 gallons worth of
Okay.
fluid over the 24 hours, which is not, super unrealistic. Um, if it's 10, 10 pounds, they had to replenish that much, right? And the way that we're doing it is, it'll sound all super scientific, but we're going to follow, first things first, like right off the scale. They're going to be drinking a hypotonic, like electrolyte solution. So that's going to get the fluid into the cells as fast as possible. So it's going to have some, carbs in it, a favorable electrolyte profile to sodium to potassium. And they're going to sip on that slowly over the course of an hour to at least initially. There are some people that'll do more than that, but the research kind of shows that when it comes to like gastric emptying, so the way that your body like can digest and get the fluid going through it, it's roughly about like 1 liter an hour. Like you can push a little higher to like 1.5, but that's like on the higher end of the spectrum. So I like to generally go to about 1 liter an hour, right? So they're getting this solution that I made for them, like a ORS, like a oral rehydration solution. They're
Mhm.
sipping on that slowly over the course of an hour. And then it kind of depends on how much weight they had to cut to, because if they cut a lot, maybe I might have, 2 hours worth of fluid, so 2 liters before we start giving them any foods, but we start to slowly introduce things. So, like I said, obviously the ORS, they sip that slowly. Then, just an example, maybe at the 30-minute mark, we start to introduce some foods to them, but they're going to be very very easily fast digesting, low fat, super quick digesting carbs, like like saltine crackers, maybe a little bit of applesauce, and just things like that that are like super easily digestible. Not a whole lot, but just kind of like preps their stomach, right? And so we'll do that. So like I said, ORS. Then we're moving into the basic foods, and then from there, roughly 2 to 3 hours later, um, we'll start to introduce more of their more normal foods for them, like actual meal, like rice and chicken. But generally speaking, when we're going post weight cut, we want to go very low fat because it's slow digesting, low fiber too, because the fiber will sit in your stomach and it'll slow down the digestion process. And we need to shuttle all those nutrients, all those carbs, all those, sodium back into the muscle and into the body so that you can perform well and fight with the proper pop that you want in your strikes or takedowns to make sure that you're back to 100%. Because part of that too, the previous week that we're doing during fight week is we're depleting our sodium levels in our body. We're depleting the amount of carbohydrates that we eat because both 1 gram of sodium and 1 gram of carbohydrates hold on to 3 grams of water. So those are ways by like eliminating out from your diet during fight week, we can reduce our body weight without actually having to step into the sauna first. It's just what our body's holding on to, right, in our muscles. Um, so we need to replenish that. So that's obviously using the ORS rehydration solution at a rate of around 1 liter per hour. So that's about like 2.2 pounds as a liter. We're replacing 150% of the fluids that we totally lost at that rate. So if that's like 2 gallons roughly, that's approximately one, two, three, four, five, six, maybe 7 liters total of water before we're at that mark. So that might take like 7 hours to really get all of that fluid in to where we need to go. And then while we're doing that too, we're slowly introducing foods, starting off with very basic stuff, and then eating roughly every 2 to 3 hours till they're about like 70 to 80% full, moderate protein, very high fast digesting carbs like white rice, maybe some pasta. Obviously not going crazy on those sauces and whatnot, but and very low in fat too, so that it helps. It's not slowed down in the whole digestion process.
It sounds. Uh, the recovery part is always definitely the most important part after obviously successful weight cut. Um, Sometimes you see fighters they eat after the fight itself. Is that are you still continuing with basically just after that, like they eat a pizza, but the UFC gives some people pizzas? So it's kind of like, is that a pretty solid thing to have? I guess because it replenishes everything, or is it not very? Yeah.
Like after the fight itself.
Yep.
Well, there's definitely the cravings that they got in camp from being super restrictive, right? But this actually goes into like a very interesting topic that I think obviously the guys at the higher level who take it very, very seriously, they'll incorporate this into them, but even not all of them will. But one thing like the more regional level guys or the amateur guys can take into is their actual post-fight nutrition as well and how that can set them up and like make their career longer as well. Um, so obviously you're gonna have your cravings, whatever it may be, pizza like patty, or I think
Yes.
Khabib's like favorite. Yeah, I think Khabib's favorite was burgers, right? So whatever it may be. I think Sadiq, it was really funny. I think after his last fight, we went to the restaurant for the dinner, and he door dashed like crumble cookie to the restaurant. He was eating it before the food, he was just craving something sweet. It was pretty funny, but uh, yeah. So like obviously you're gonna have that craving. It's just a matter of really tracking things and like not letting it go overboard, right? Like maybe 24 or 48 hours, eat whatever you want. That's great, right? You get that little psychological kickback, you hit those cravings and whatnot. Um, and you know, it's just part of the game, right? You get so restricted for so long that you're just naturally going to want those things. That's perfectly fine. But like I said, where those lower level guys can really take their game to the next level and elongate their career is incorporating something like a reverse diet into their approach after the fight. So let's say fight Saturday, Sunday, Monday, they do whatever. And then Tuesday, they're back on their diet, not like super strict and like what they're doing, but they're at least hitting their calorie and macro targets. You can get a little more processed on the type of foods they want to eat if they want to, but they're hitting those targets. And so let's just say during fight week or not fight week or during their camp, they got down the week before fight week. They were at, let's use a number, 2,000 calories, right? And now what we want to do with a reverse diet is like a gradual increase back up in calories to maintenance. So let's just say they were at 2,000 calories eating in the last week. Then their total energy expenditure or maintenance would have been like 3,000 calories. That's like 1,000 calorie deficit a day, right? Which can be a lot, especially someone, I mean, anyone in general, who wants to lose weight. That's more on the higher end of the spectrum. So one things we'll do is, especially if their camps are longer, they're a little more aggressive on the cut. There might be some metabolic adaptations to how their body, like typical things like hit a plateau or my metabolism slowed down, or you know what I mean, like those type of things that you hear. And actually, bodybuilders are really good at this. And so, like after the show or after the fight, incorporating this reverse diet approach, where now this next week we're eating instead of 2,000 calories, which was the amount that we had during fight week, now we're eating 2,100 calories. Then the next week, we're eating 2,200 calories. The next week, we're eating 2,300 calories, give or take, could be 1 to 200 that you're adding on each week. And what this will do is it'll kind of like bring your metabolism back to baseline and also help you manage the weight a little better. And then not really just shock your system with going in and just eating like 4,000 calories like every single day, right? And also prevent you from like ballooning up in weight. It'll help, it'll prevent you from having like any metabolic damage that you might do to your system and just kind of like bring you back to more baseline um on just like a physiological level, right? Because I mean, like everything we do in the sport is just so extreme, from just like clashing shins on each other's head to choking each other out to before we even do that where they're cutting like 10 to 15 pounds of pure water that week after 8 weeks of 1,000 calorie a day plus deficit, you know what I mean? So nothing's like normal in the sport. So doing that and bringing ourselves back to like a more normal baseline can really be helpful for them, especially those lower level guys, because then they might, you never know, maybe you got another fight, short notice, or UFC calls now. You're a 5-0 guy, and you can't afford to go and balloon up between fights because now 2 weeks after that fight that you just won that, maybe CFFC title or whatever, those more regional shows that's on UFC Fight Pass, you getting a call from the UFC on a short notice thing or a Contender Series, so that definitely helps you to keep you more in line with things too in that regard.
Yeah, I definitely understand that because it's to the point where you never know when you'll get that call. Because a lot of your fighters you do help with the weight cuts is actually like they're not technically fighting in like very low promotions at all. They're fighting at the ones that were mostly on UFC Fight Pass, and then so it's Dana White, or not really Dana White himself, but I would say a lot of the fight matchmakers and stuff like that, people that watch the other programs on Fight Pass are just like, we're gonna pull from this guy this week. And then like the LFA, obviously it's to the point where LFA is definitely a strong big feeder. Um, and then so it kind of happens to the point where I love it. It happens to the point where they have to go, or like this could be your chance, and then you just kind of blown up afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah. And and also too, it's like I think nowadays it's like really your only way to get into the UFC, at least, because that really is like the highest echelon of the sport, is unless you just got some crazy good management, which a lot of people don't have those connections. So it's going to be short notice on someone dropped out or a Contender Series, and that even might be short notice too. You never know. But the short notice stuff is, you never know when it can happen, when your opportunity can come. And a lot of times too, like if you take something on short notice, 2 weeks, and like the other guys had a full amount of time to prepare, and you're a filler on that, a lot of times they're not going to hold it against you if you got that loss.
No,
They're like, you did us a favor, so we'll do you a favor, and you know what I mean. Scratch your back, you scratch ours, and then maybe it's your chance to showcase, where you're at and how you do things. It's funny enough, like for this PFL event, the one in DC last
mhm.
night, there was the main event, Thad Gene versus, I believe it was some Russian Masayev or Musar. I'm forgetting the name exactly, but that was the main event. I forget what exactly happened, but we were down there and basically they told him that he couldn't cut any more weight. And so they pulled him from the card. I don't know the whole process on that or like what specifically happened, but he was pulled out from the card, the Russian guy, right?
Yeah.
One of the guys lower on the card, uh, still fighting at 170. They told him like, hey, this guy's not fighting anymore. You're shy. You want to fight for the title or not? Guy's like, yeah, let's run it. And that was his shot. And um it didn't I think he got stopped in the third round, but man, second fight in PFL, fighting for the title. The second round he dropped the champ too. You know what I mean? So a fight like that, short notice opportunity, your time to shine, even though he lost, like there's no way they're holding that against him. They kept the main event going, kept the card going. He dropped the champ, you know what I mean? So I'm sure they're gonna set him up good and take care of him.
Now I bet the champ is a little bit nervous. He's like, all right.
Yeah, imagine 24 hours notice. Yeah.
And you get dropped. It's like maybe maybe I do a little bit more training this time before I fight this guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's kind of like before we log off here, what is the best advice you can probably give someone that I will say wants to have a successful fight career for nutrition? What is the best advice you can give them?
So I'll say this for nutrition and strength conditioning, because I mean that's my background too, strength conditioning. I mentored under like Gav Pratt, who's like the head
Yeah,
director for strength conditioning at the PI, I believe in
yeah,
Shanghai. I knew he worked there. I don't know if he's back in Vegas now or not, but I'd say for both nutrition and strength conditioning is not leaving things for when you just have a fight.
yeah,
You know, if you want to be a professional in the sport, like obviously you're gonna have to make sacrifices, but that's not just when we have a fight. It's gonna be when we don't have a fight. Obviously, it's not gonna be as intense. You can eat a lot more out of camp or whatever it may be, right? And you're working on things year round to get to where you need to go. Tracking things yourself. Um, so I guess number one is having a plan, sticking with it, staying disciplined, and tracking things year round, not just when you have a fight. And for people that don't really know anything about nutrition or like they're just lost in the sauce on it, it's just like maybe those lower level guys or something like that. I would say getting something like My Fitness Pal,
mhm,
little app that you can get and you can track your food intake. Start measuring it, start tracking things. You start to see, okay, this has this much carbs, this much fat, this much protein, and you start to learn the ins and outs a little more because there's literally numbers on a screen for you. And you're just following the numbers, plug and play. And then you really start to learn your body more because you're tracking things yourself. Um, you really start to know, like, even when you're having cheat days and you go and I don't know, there's something crazy. Like you go to fucking McDonald's just because whatever
Ah.
craving chicken McNuggets because that's like your weakness, right? Whatever it may be, or chicken wings or pizza. Like you actually track that and record it in the app so okay, this is how much like calories it is or whatever, or protein, carbs, fats, and you really know like what it may do to your body, how you feel, being aware with things, um, and stuff like that. Because the more you track, the more it'll start to click for you. And so then when it comes time to like it really matter and you're in fight camp, you already have that experience of doing it outside of camp. I think those are like really the two things. It's like, having a plan year round, not just when you're in fight camp. And then two, tracking things as well year round as well and doing it for yourself. I mean, it takes people say it does like they don't have the time to do it, but it's literally boom. Open up my phone. What did I have today for breakfast? Meal one, 3 eggs, search, add, 1, 2, 3. Half a cup of oatmeal, add. I don't know, fourth a cup of blueberries, add honey, add. What does that equal out to? Okay, this much. Then I add my stuff throughout the day. And then, it takes 2 seconds. If you really want to be a professional in the sport, you gotta, make it to the highest level. Or, even if you don't have a dream to become a champ, you still want to fight at a high level. Like you're professional, right? It's what professionals do. It's your job now. You gotta do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Cause now when I watch, now when I watch the fight games, list the guys you get me and females you get me, I'm going to say, well, this is a strength and conditioning coach for these guys. I'm like, man,
Yeah.
that's pretty. I do appreciate you for speaking to me today. It was completely awesome. Is there anything you want to say before we log off here today?
Um, I'll just say if you guys, if anyone out there is interested, need some help, I got plenty of like free resources and guides and whatnot. Can get you guys moving in the right direction. Like you don't have to hire me. I got a ton of stuff to move them out in the right direction. So they can find me at either Peter Kohout on Instagram. We'll add my link, whatever, or champions.performance on Instagram. And you can just reach out to me and I'll send you guys some free stuff your way to help you. I got a little combat sports nutrition guide that we can give out to you guys. And give you from everything, kind of what I covered, roughly A to Z on like how to figure out what they need, the calories, how to calculate them out, how to kind of make a rough meal plan, things like that.
Sure. I thank you for your time. Thank you for speaking with me and just using your platform, using the platform to speak to me. So it's completely
Yeah,
awesome.
that was awesome. I like having these conversations, just spreading the word and you know, letting people know and giving people knowledge. I hope people took I feel like I dropped a good amount of sauce for some people who doesn't know anything at all to figure out where they need to go. So
Absolutely, because you got to deal with the hard part. So yeah, the fighters love and hate you at the same time.
right, right.
But I appreciate you, sir. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.